Good evening, Jeff. It's so good to see you, darling.
Same.
You've got a sinus thing going on. I just drip normally from winter, and plus I cry about every 20 minutes, whether I need to or not. And so I've got my tissues. You've got your coffee. I've got my coffee. And we are the students, we are the teacher, and this is Soul School. And we welcome everyone to attend class tonight. So class is in session. And this is the show that we were going to do last week, except that we had an ice storm here in Georgia, which was very interesting. It's been years and years since we got hit so hard. We had a half an inch of ice, 3 or 4 inches of snow, and then another half an inch of ice to compress the snow. And then nobody went anywhere for 4 days until it melted. So yeah, it was interesting. It was fun. And teaching, it was the first time that little Peanut Butter, who is sleeping next to me, my little dog, had ever seen snow or ice. So that was the most amusing, most fun part. We lost our electricity, but not for a long time. It didn't even get to the point where we had to build a fire in the stove behind me under the mantle board there. We didn't even have to, although we had all of the wood and all of our supplies in, and we were as prepared gets. Those of you who watch the show regularly know I'm here in Georgia with my sister Christine, who is also my advocate, my caregiver as I fight cancer. She's right there for me, and I deeply, deeply appreciate her in my life. She is an earth angel. She truly is. My dad had a mild stroke last week, spent a few days in the hospital. He's home now. He's doing much, much better. No symptoms. They've got him on the right meds. He's doing great. So for anybody that got wind of Dad's travails, he's fine. So tonight, Jeff, we are going to do our show that we had intended to do last week. And I know people have been reaching out to you. People have been reaching out to me. And when that happens, when I have that kind of frequency of people asking the same question or seeking the same input, I guess, from me, I like to focus one of our shows on that subject, because if it's resonating with me and that's the frequency that's going on out there amongst our viewers, then I think that it's best that we address what they're sharing and what they're experiencing. And what I have noticed in the last couple of weeks is that there are a lot of people who are stressed out, and I don't think it's just because of the holidays. The holidays were relatively peaceful and stress-free. Unfortunately, we began our new year with a, mass killing in New Orleans and so on and so on. But I don't think it's that. I think it's the political climate. I think that people are upset, people are distressed, people are afraid, people are unnerved, and people are depressed. And so I think that that's generating a lot of this negative inner conflict, because I don't know about you, but when I'm feeling that plethora of swirling emotions, I don't hop on the phone and call at, any of my friends and say, oh my God, Well, that's not true. Greta and Linny and Erin, they'll hear it from me. But usually it's just, my tribe of my sisterhood, um, and my family, my sisters and my family. And usually I don't express it beyond that realm, because I don't want to give it energy, for one thing. And I want to focus my energy on making it subside rather than giving it new life by regularly discussing it. But I think that it would behoove us tonight to address ways of resolving our inner conflict. And I recently sent you a clip about Carl Jung's attitude about this and how to approach it and how to acknowledge it as part of us, what you have described a multitude of times as that dark part of us, that shadow that we carry with us all the time. But in a lot of ways, our internal conflict is relegated to our self-imposed solitude. We tend not to share those feelings, not only because we don't want others that we love and adore to feel that pain for us or with us through empathy or just through telepathy, because that is a high form of communication. And people who are close feel each other's feelings without even talking. But I think that there are a lot of people that are suffering in quiet desperation and who are feeling very much alone. And tonight, I just want to assure anyone who is struggling with these feelings, just to reassure them that they are not alone, that they are more the rule than the exception. And so you and I had touched base a little bit back and forth in the last couple of weeks about this. And I wanted to get your take on it, especially from Carl Jung's perspective. And then we'll go from there and discuss it and help people work through this tumultuous emotional time that so many are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things. One, I do have a bit of a scratchy throat tonight and some sinus things going on, so I apologize. If I already said if I have a coughing or sneezing fit, just get out the cane and pull me off the stage for a minute. And
it's okay,
also,
you're allowed to be a human being. I appreciate that you're here while you're sick. So thank you.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And that leads me to the second thing I wanted to say is that it's so good to be back here on a Friday night with everyone. It's been at least feels like almost a month, right? Since we've done one, just through the holidays and different things happening. So it's so good to be back with you. And it's also so love you guys. And it's a joy and a treasure and a pleasure to be able to spend these Friday evenings with you all. And I'm especially excited to be able to spend 2 hours with you all tonight. So join us in the second hour as well. If you typically only watch this hour or whatever, because we'll be back. Yes. So inner conflict. You brought up Jung, right? And this is a very Jungian dilemma, right? The notion of inner conflict. Jesus said that we are to be as wise as serpents, but as innocent as doves, right? Wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove. That speaks to the duality of our natures, right? Say to be one or the other. He says we are to be both, as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And the wisdom of the serpent is the shrewdness of the serpent, right? The serpent is shrewd. It's not easily taken advantage. It's mercurial in the sense that it sheds its skin and it renews itself constantly. It's a serpent, right? I mean, there's a hunting predatory, cold-blooded aspect to the serpent. Like, you think serpent, and even take the notion of like the serpent in the Garden of Eden out of the equation. You think of a serpent, you think, ooh, dangerous, right? I mean, and some people like snakes and they like them as pets and whatnot. But I mean, I think naturally humans sort of have an aversion, and over time we've developed like an ability to be okay with that. But I think even just evolutionarily speaking, from a new evolutionary perspective, we have an aversion to serpents because they were sort of they were predatory to us. I mean, we were hominids, swinging through trees, and we encountered serpents both, in the trees and on the ground, and it was a frightening thing. So when we think serpent, we think something fearful, we think something predatory, and yet Jesus says we are to be as shrewd or as wise as a serpent. But he also said we're to be as innocent as a dove. And the dove, the gentleness of the dove, the peacemaking nature of the dove, the delicacy, the delicate nature of the dove. I don't mean the dove as a delicacy for the serpent. I mean like the delicate nature of the dove. I suppose in one sense, maybe, yeah, because these are two things that seem like one should be hunting the other. And yet Jesus says, have both of these in yourself,
Right.
living one another. There's also an interesting passage in the book of Isaiah, pardon me, where it says that when the kingdom of God is fully established, so our archetypal way of thinking about that would be like when you're in a place of wholeness, is integrated and put together properly, right? Where the kingdom of God, so to speak, is established in one's life, where your life is in order, right? That the wolf will lie down with the lamb. You often hear it as the lion with the lamb, but it's actually the wolf will lie down with the lamb. Again, two things that don't seem to go together, right? One is predator to the other is prey to the other. And yet when things are proper in order, these things that don't seem to go together at all find peace and they lay down with one another. And I think there are those of us who are more peace loving in nature, right? We are more the dove than we are the serpent naturally. There are those of us who are more the lamb than we are the wolf. We're naturally bent in that direction. I'm more of a peacemaker. My eldest daughter is going to be, oh, Lord help me. My eldest daughter is going to be moving down to Florida in next week. So we're moving her down there. What's that?
She's going there on purpose, like,
She's going to be joining the Disney College like internship program. So only for a few months, but very excited about it and very excited for her. Yeah. However, I'm moving and I'm also taking on a new position in my day job that helps keep the lights on, in which I'm going to be on the road traveling 3 to 4 days a week. So my family and I were having dinner with my parents last night, and my wife commented to them that all of the peacemakers in our family are going to be gone now, talking about me and my eldest daughter by nature, right? We're both more lambs by nature. That's just kind of who we are. When there's conflict, I try to insert myself into the situation to resolve my day job. I'm kind of known as the guy who, like, when other people are aggressive towards, individuals with whom we must work in order for things to function, I'm known as the guy who's kind of like the good cop to somebody else's bad cop. I'm just the guy who I'm like, come on, let cooler heads prevail, get a hold of yourself. You're not going to get anywhere by giving into that inclination. We got to work with so-and-so. And so come on, let's get it together. I'm that guy. I'm a lamb by nature. I'm more of a dove by nature. Other people are more serpents by nature. They're more wolves by nature. And I don't necessarily mean that in the predatory, though there are those who are that, right? Who are more fully given into that nature. That's true, right? And then there are those who are more so fully given into the other nature that they are unfortunately inclined to be preyed upon because they are so naive, right?
Yes.
And it's true.
I'm one of those, and conflict is anathema to me. I hate it. I think that it's not my fault I was born this way. I am Libra through and through. I have 5 planets in Libra, my sun, my moon, and it's I can't help it. And all I want is peace and love to reign supreme on planet Earth. So
Mhm.
I live in a constant state of conflict and disappointment
Yeah.
and anger and disgust. And,
Yeah.
I just don't like how things are going on
Mhm.
this planet.
Yeah.
Before my mother passed away, she said, I was born into a world at war and I will die in a world at war. And we haven't learned a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And those were her words. And
Mhm.
I just held her in my arms and said, I know, it's true. We
Yeah.
haven't learned a thing. Um, she was so upset about the invasion of Ukraine. She's so upset about what happened in Israel and Gaza and
Mhm.
Syria. And she doesn't even, well, I can't say she doesn't know what just happened in Syria, but I feel certain that she's aware, that she knows what's happening down here. Her focus right now is on helping me personally so that I can be here to help others. And that's part of what we do in Soul
Mhm.
School is share these thoughts and these impressions and our own emotional turmoil in hopes that it reaches someone who needs to
Mhm.
hear what this message is. And that message is internal conflict is a perfectly natural thing to experience,
Yes.
and that it is not something that we can resolve by flipping a switch. We have to resolve our conflicts within ourselves by realizing that we are a higher power. We are what some would call Christ consciousness or cosmic consciousness or, source energy, that, it's all one thing. And
Mhm.
so, in that experience of this thing called life, it is not only natural, but it's inevitable that we will have times and experiences that create a great deal of conflict within us.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes will create conflict between us and other people, especially those that we love. And how do you get
Yep.
to a place where that can be resolved without uh, creating more consternation to get to
Yep.
a point of resolution?
Yep.
Um, from our personal conversations that I had a while back had a falling out with someone who I've known for a very long time and love very much,
Mhm.
and have kept my distance for several months now because I feel like there's no resolving this situation. I just don't feel like we can come to the same conclusion, make amends, and move on from there.
Mhm.
There was a fundamental shift that occurred in a 50-year-long relationship that, given time, might be quelled, might be, have our emotions sated to the point where we can have a civilized conversation about what happened.
Yeah.
But that's not the time now. This is
Mhm.
not the time. And I'm not ready. And I can't have any kind of negative energy swirling in my mind or that energetic motion through my body. I
Mhm.
can't.
Yeah.
So, what I've done is gone into a very quiet, very peaceful, very internal place
Mhm.
where I feel safe and I feel just buffeted by those around me that love me, that protect me, that pray for me, that lift me up. That's what I need in my life. Part of my conflict was saying no for the
Yeah.
first time, saying, no, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
No, this can't happen again. No, I don't want to see you.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to talk.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's a really hard word for a lot of people to come to terms with, let alone use
Yep.
in a sentence.
Yeah.
It's tough. It is. And when you're like, I am, let's make it right. Let's make it good. Let's, make amends. Let's forget about it. Let's move on. And there's been a fundamental shift that has occurred in my life where for the first time in my life, literally the first time in my life, I have put my needs first ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a difficult thing for a dove or a lamb to do.
It is. And I am a mourning dove. That is
Yeah.
my
I didn't mean to
favorite
interrupt.
bird. Mourning doves are the most gentle, passive, lovely, delicate, fragile creatures. And I'm like the personification of that. That's who I am. And so it's easier for me to, instead of confront a situation, I would prefer to lift my wings and allow the air to lift me out of the situation. I am also in mourning. I am in mourning for my sister, who we lost in 2017. I am in mourning for my mother, who we just lost last June. And I live in a state of perpetual grief, kind of a low level, it never leaves sadness that I have to confront on a daily basis and find my way up and out of, like the phoenix rising from the ashes. So I understand. I lost Jeff, but I think he can hear me. He'll be back. I understand how people struggle with these emotions and how people it's easier to ignore the angst than it is to confront it and to find out where it's coming from and why and how to restore that balance within us that we all seek and rarely find. So tonight I want to talk about the self-imposed prison that we put ourselves into. If I could be so bold as to suggest that when you are feeling despair, when you are feeling desperation, when you are feeling loneliness, when you are feeling let down by the world, that's the most important time, in my opinion, to reach out to someone that you trust, that you can speak with about your emotional turmoil. And very often you will choose the person to have that conversation with who needs to have that conversation as much as you do. And they haven't bothered to tell you that because they didn't want to impose on your time, because they're just as thoughtful and gentle and considerate as you are. I have several people that come to mind. I have my friend Candace up in Michigan, who sent me a gorgeous picture of a sunset tonight. She's like, I didn't even use a filter. It's the real sunset. Can you even believe how beautiful it is? Yes. She also told me that it was 18 degrees and that was the actual temperature, not the wind chill. So I admired her sunset, and she brought a smile to my face at precisely the moment that I needed it. It's those connections that we have with each other. I could have at that point launched into a conversation or a text message with Candace describing what I was concerned about. I had to do another show before I had to do our shows tonight. So I'm into, 3 hours of this tonight. And I was so tired. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Oh my God, let me pull myself together. Oh my God, let me go make a cup of coffee. Oh my God, put some lipstick on so you don't look like a swamp hag. I mean, I go through all of that, the churning of the grist mill in my mind before we actually hit the screen. And I know you've been going through it too a lot, Jeff. I mean, major upheaval, major huge changes with a big
Yeah.
fat promotion and a whole new job description and expectations of you traveling away from your family, and you live in Michigan. Oh my God. I know it's supposedly God's country, but it's only God's country for June, July, and August. And the
Yeah.
rest of the time, it is a hellscape of ice.
You know,
And
I'll give it the fall, it's still God's country, but once you hit January through like March, yeah, forget it, man. Which is I think why I disappeared for a minute. It sounds like Odin's wild hunt going on outside right now with the wind, and we just a huge gust, and I went out, so I think we lost connection there for a minute. So, but
that's
yeah.
okay. If you
Mhm.
have to hop out and hop back in, you just go ahead and do it. Believe me, everybody who's watching understands. But
Mhm.
how are you dealing with this kind of a personal paradigm shift for you?
Mhm.
Uh, how are you dealing with it? I know you're tired. I know
Mhm.
you're working ridiculous hours.
Mhm.
I hope I'm not saying too much, but
Mhm.
I know you well enough to know when your vibration's a little off and when you're
Mhm.
stressing. I know
Mhm.
it. I can
Yeah.
see it. I can feel it. I sense it.
Mhm.
Telepathically, I pick up on it because we're so close.
Yeah.
And how are you dealing with it, honey?
I think as well as I could. Um, and at this point in my life, I'm can to make preparations for change. You know what I mean? Because I know some big changes are on their way. Like I said, I mean in a couple, well, next week, yeah, actually. Whew, again, Lord help me. I haven't let myself think about it too much. Moving my daughter down to Florida, that's going to be a massive change in our home. And then I'm going to be on the road more than I have been for years. That's also going to be a massive change. So in the interim, I'm doing the best that I can to prepare the ground for what's coming. You know what I mean? For change, to make things as easy as I can make them for those who are going to be in a different position while I'm also in a different position. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sort of trying to busy myself with that, which is taking a lot of mental and physical energy to do. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm dealing with it, but at the same time, like I said, when it comes to the issue of my daughter being away from home, I've not really let myself think too much about it. I know this is the week where I need to let myself begin to feel it a little bit so that when we're in Florida saying, goodbye, not really goodbye, but, as
Yeah.
much as we've ever said goodbye in 20 years, um, I don't want to feel it all just in that moment. So, I'm prepping myself as best I can for that, but I'm also very, very good at kinking the hose of my emotions
Hmm.
in the name of trying to um, help everybody else not experience mine and to be able to experience their own. You know what I mean? I'm very good at that, and that might be a toxic male trait in some level too.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a mechanism I think most of us use eh, with the best of intentions to try to help other people cope. But I'm trying to not let it all just bottle up and come out at once. But
And you have to be careful about that too, because
yeah.
you know that when you kink a hose, the
Hmm.
pressure builds up
Yeah. Well, and it's
inside
like you were,
the hose.
yeah,
And if
it's like you were
there's a,
saying about the,
it'll split.
yeah, yeah. As you said about the dove wolf, dichotomy, the whole notion of with the individual with whom you had a falling out, and it was like, well, for years you'd never said your piece, or maybe never stood up for yourself in a certain area, and that's what the lamb does. That's what the dove does. We often just kind of defer to everyone else, and it actually, and sometimes we can almost then unfairly resent people because they're not trying to force that on us. It's just it's our natural proclivity to like defer to other people, you know what I mean? And then we can sometimes even have a snap at somebody they don't deserve. We're the ones who kind of were like withholding, but I'm not saying that's the true, it's the near case, because it's not. But I mean, it can sometimes be that, but then a lot of times it's that we kind of let ourselves just be pushed around and we never stand up for ourselves. And then the moment we do, everyone's like, oh, clutching their pearls and like, how dare you, like, what happened to you, and it's like, well, I acted like you one time, and you can't handle it. But it's like, but I guess that's the hard part. That's why, Jesus says to be both, and why it sounds like such a hard thing to do is because for a dove, for a lamb, the thought of acting serpentine, the thought of acting wolf-like, it's horrifying for us to consider that. You know what I mean? It's horrifying for us to consider, like, even just for me, letting my own emotions have their way for a few minutes, because I'm so used to, and I'm pretty well regulated, but still, I'm so used to just being like, I'm cool, I got this, you have your moment, I got this, you know what I mean? But you do that long enough, there's going to be a little eruption, and it's going to be, and you're going to hurt somebody, and you're going to say something you didn't mean to say, and that you can't get back, unfortunately. So that's why the integration is so important, and that's why when you have a moment like the one you mentioned, right, where you have a falling out, there's some conflict with someone.
Approximately the energy expelled by Vesuvius in Pompeii AD 79.
Yeah. And then it's like, you might kind of let out in a moment what someone else has gradually let out in you over a lifetime, and then they're shocked by it, and it's like, well, you shouldn't be shocked when you stop and consider the history of the relationship here and who's played what role and who's played the other role. But oftentimes people are, and a lot of times no one's more shocked than us when we see ourselves behaving.
That's certainly true of me, because I know myself as a very gentle soul. And I am all love and light until I'm not. And when I get that angry, there's nothing pretty about it. It's just plain ugly. And I regret not being able to say what I needed to say in the moment in a more healthy way. Healthy for me and healthy for her. And I was so offended and so upset that I just let myself explode, and it buried everyone around me in hot ash and lava, a pyroclastic flow of negative energy. And at first I thought, oh my God, this is a major setback for me. This is just a major setback for me. And the more as the weeks passed, the more I realized that what I expelled and what I projected out was probably the healthiest thing that I could have done. And that by internalizing those feelings for so long and never saying anything about it was part of the reason why I got sick. And so I've chosen to look at it differently, in the same way that a few weeks ago, the last time we were together, you talked about, walking with your, me and my shadow, walking with your shadow, holding hands with your shadow, being able to accept that where your form literally creates your own silhouette on a wall
Yeah.
because the light is dispersed around your form.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very interesting and probably helpful way
Hmm.
for us to look at this, because we can't change who we are.
Yep.
We can't. It's what and who we are is imbued within us. And somebody that gets to my age, I mean, you can make an ardent attempt to alter certain elements of your personality or promise yourself that you'll never let something like that happen again. You know, it's almost like making a bargain with the devil. You know,
Mhm.
I don't even believe in the devil, but you know, if there's a devil, it's kind of like having a conversation with, you know, that element of ourselves
Yeah.
that we are very often ashamed that it even exists.
Yep. Yep. No, and that's it. And I think if you remember at the beginning of Peter Pan, he's looking for his shadow, right?
Yep.
The eternal boy, right? The
Mhm.
eternal youth who could not grow up, who did not grow up. We find him in the beginning of that story searching for his shadow. He lost his shadow. And we stay in a state, we remain in a state of arrested development often when we become detached from our shadow. And that's the like archetype embedded there, whether it's intended or not. You know, when we are unable to accept parts of ourselves that are absolutely necessary,
Mhm.
not only to our survival in this world, but that are necessary, I think, in some way to the world's survival, because the world needs integrated people. You know, when we cut ourselves off from those aspects of ourselves because they shock us, you know, and they often do shock us because of how long we suppress them, right?
Right.
And we suppress the shadow, or, you know, for some people are so aggressive, you know, and I don't relate to that. I don't relate to that, but I
Either.
understand it. Some people are just very aggressive, and life made them that way, right?
Yeah.
The brutality of life maybe made them brutal, or maybe made them a little more aggressive. They felt like they had to assert themselves and dominate more because they always felt asserted over and dominated, right? And so they felt the need to push back. And so when someone like that comes to a point in their life where, I don't know, they in a friendship, maybe they submit to another person in the sense of like they become vulnerable to someone and share their heart, that to a or in a relationship, a romantic relationship, maybe they in a sense, not in some weird sense submit, but they love a person and they feel safe with a person, and so for the first time they let their guard down, and they're not always seeking to domineer. They can rest and feel taken care of, and like, okay, I'm okay here. Like that can be as shocking for someone as it is for you and me to find that aggression coming out of us because we're bent in these different directions, right?
Mhm.
And so for people like you and I who are more doves and lambs, it takes encounters with the wolves and the serpents of this world to bring out our inner wolf and serpent. And the serpents and the wolves of this world oftentimes have to encounter the vulnerability of the lamb and the dove in a way that awakens them to, oh my God, my behavior is destructive. You know, when they love the dove, when they love the lamb, and they see how their own wolf likeness and serpentine nature is affecting, that stops them as much as someone else's brutality stops us. And that's the point where we realize I'm not complete without this other side of me. And so all of my life I was very compliant. You know what I mean? Very compliant, very yes. And internally I wasn't necessarily compliant. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? I wasn't always necessarily agreeing here. I was kind of
Mhm.
I was a rebel inside, but on the outside I was a peacekeeper
Yeah.
rather than a peacemaker. And a peacemaker and a peacekeeper are two different types of things, right? The
Yes.
peacekeeper just keeps everything okay. The
Mhm.
peacemaker sometimes has to do stuff, make
Right.
space.
Actively generate, uh, literally change the frequency and the vibration of
Yeah.
everything going on around them in order to bring it
Yep.
into synchronicity.
Yep. Yeah. peacemaking sometimes involves confrontation. Peacemaking involves things like that I don't like. Peacekeeping is easier for me to just say, oh yeah, fine, whatever you want, fine with me, no big deal. But then you don't really get peace, right? Because peacekeeping isn't real peace, because then you don't actually have peace. Someone else has peace, but you don't. And so that peace then is illusory, and it'll eventually show itself. So it starts here in the microcosm of the individual life of marrying those parts of ourselves together that we don't think belong. That predator and prey that certainly seem like they're at odds with each other. But in the kingdom of God, so to speak, archetypally, when everything is rightly in order, predator and prey are buds. They're not bent on preying on the other one, or bowing low and let the other bite its neck. That's not the roles they play when the kingdom of God is established. But yeah, so for me, I've had to encounter my own darkness in moments, of like feeling angry towards the system, feeling angry, whatever. And then I see, for a season, I let myself really just live in that. You know what I mean? I really let myself live in the shadow of that, which was difficult. It was hard for me, but I knew I had to do it. I had to let myself live in it. I had to let myself feel it. And it kind of disintegrated my former personality, which was all compliance, all dove, all lamb, and when I kind of let serpent and wolf have their way, in a sense, of kind of like, no, I'm not just going to be a yes man. I'm not just going to say amen, yes, sir, to everything that anyone in authority says. No, I'm done with that. I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not just going to believe what you tell me to believe because you tell me it's good to believe it. I'm not just going to vote the way you tell me to vote. I'm not just going to whatever because you tell me it's no. Like when I started to assert myself and say no to that, I came in contact with a part of myself I was completely ostracized from for most of my life. And then I began to integrate it. Slowly but surely, those two parts began to come together. At first, I loathed the part of myself that I deemed as weak and far too submissive. And you let people walk all over you, and you were just a doormat for people, man. You were weak, and you want to let that strong part have its way. And you do, until you maybe hurt someone you love with it.
And alienate people that you really, truly love.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that begins to make integration happen, because you have disintegration is what happens when conflict occurs, right? And you take on one rather than the other, and the old way starts to disintegrate. But then reintegration happens when you realize the necessity of your former way of life that you want to completely jettison. When you realize, oh, it isn't that I was wrong, it's that I was incomplete. It isn't that what I was before was weak or whatever, it's that it was incomplete. And that's when you learn to bring back that part of yourself that you want to alienate yourself from. And these two things become one. A house divided against itself can't stand, right? A person who's divided against themselves, shadow and light, wolf, lamb, it doesn't work, right? And I was even thinking about this recently in the because it's Christmas, right? Or it was Christmas. It's still Christmas in my house. I told you before we came on.
Too, actually. Yeah, right here.
I'm stubborn when it comes to Christmas. Tomorrow we're taking down Christmas in the rest of the house, but here in the back room where my office is, the tree's staying up probably till March or something. So,
could make it an Easter tree.
Yeah, exactly. But some of the earliest images of the nativity, right? Some of the earliest images only have the Christ child. And then the image of the donkey or the ass and the ox. And that's it. They only have those two things and the Christ child. No wise men, no Mary and Joseph, no shepherds, no sheep, the ass, the ox, and the Christ child. And the reason for that is because there was an Old Testament law that said you cannot yoke an ass together with an ox, because one is considered clean in Jewish law and the other is considered unclean. So you cannot yoke the two things together. You can't connect them together in plowing a field to yoke them together, to make it simple. And yet the image the earliest Christians used to show the nativity was the Christ child bringing together, yoking together the ass and the ox, right? The parts of ourselves, let's say, that we think this is clean, this is unclean, this is dark, this is light, this is shadow, this is light. In the Christ in this sense, which in itself represents the coming together of matter and spirit, divinity and humanity, because at the end of the day, that's what the word Christ means. Christ means matter and spirit coming together as one thing. That's even what the symbol of the Eucharist is that it's the simplest of all things. Unleavened bread that tastes like styrofoam, and yet in partaking of that symbol, one enables themselves to believe that they're partaking of everything. In the partaking of what's almost nothing, like a bad cracker, right? You're partaking of everything. So it's like matter and spirit, it's everything and nothing in one thing. That's what Christ at the core really represents. So as that begins to, the implications of that tease out into our lives, it's ass and ox come together, and it's in the individual, dark and light come together. And then in society, it bears itself out. It's the factions, the binaries that we have in society come together. And, you know, like you said, with the personal situation you had, it was like, it's not time right now to be, it's time to just sit with the decision you made and let it be, right?
Let it be. And, you know, when I was first diagnosed, that was immediately the song that moved into my head, that played in my consciousness round the clock. Let it be. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Words of wisdom. Let it be.
Yeah.
And it's not because time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. No, no, it doesn't. It might give us a little bit of frame of reference and perspective, and give us an opportunity to sit with whatever emotions we're struggling with.
Yeah.
And come to terms with them.
Yeah.
And it is in that spiritual process, and I believe that's what that is, that rather than internalizing our angst and letting it brew like some toxic mix with a flame from within, instead of that, just let it be what it is.
Yes.
For as long as it takes.
Yep.
To sink in.
Yes.
To let us get to a point where we no longer feel alienated from ourselves or ashamed of ourselves, but in touch with ourselves.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And when we encounter,
excuse me.
Oh no, God bless you. Kazuna.
I thought you would be the one to sneeze first tonight. Yeah. I really did. Yeah,
I've been talking, but no sneezing on.
God,
but the thing is, when I start to sneeze, I don't just sneeze once. I sneeze like 10 times in a row. And my family's all like, "Dad, what is going on?" Like, I have a sneeze attack. So thank God I haven't had one.
Well, we've got a whole nother hour after this.
We do. Yeah, the night is young.
And a whole nother subject.
Yes.
You know, anybody that's into what we're talking about, you know, join us in a few minutes. We're going to be doing a World Awakening together as well.
Yeah.
On an entirely different subject that's just as fascinating and hopefully helpful to anybody. See, there's Bill. There's our producer putting up 5 minutes, you know, putting us on his time schedule.
Yeah.
But every week, time is an illusion. And yet.
Here we go. Yeah.
And here we go.
He's our anchor to reality. Bill is. Yep. He is.
He is. And a kind and gentle soul.
Indeed. Indeed.
He is.
I will say, in terms of this, this notion of resolving inner conflict, right? Conflict, and this is one of the core principles of my life. It constitutes my whole understanding of what the story of the gospel is, the whole spiritual history of humanity. This is, and I'll spit this out very quickly, but this is what I think, to me, what I think it's all about. The notion, and I love it in mystical Christianity, of the logos, and it comes from Greek philosophy. Okay. But in mystical Christian thought, the notion of the logos is that the logos is that which binds reality together, essentially. It's that which takes all the constitutive parts that make up a whole and calls them by the name of the whole while they're still separated in order to bring them into unity. It looks at the nails, the boards, the brick, the mortar, the shingles, whatever that would constitute a house, and it calls it a house before it's a house. And that notion of house is the logos that makes all those separate items become a house. And some have a notion of logos. Logos is that which sits at the heart of reality. For some people, that which sits at the heart of reality is the idea of conflict between opposing pairs, and that all of life is conflict between things that don't agree.
Our duality. Yeah,
exactly. What I love about mystical Christianity in particular, and I love many forms of mysticism, but what I love about Christian mysticism in particular is that Christian mysticism says the logos at the heart of all being is not conflict between opposing pairs, but it's unity between opposing pairs. It's things that don't seem to go together coming together. The alchemists called this the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites. And that happens in the microcosm. It happens all the way up into the macrocosm. It happens in God in the sense of the nativity, even like we just said. And then it bleeds outward into the ox and the ass coming together. So like the heart of reality is the Christ child, metaphorically speaking, which is spirit and matter as one. And then it bleeds out into the nativity scene, which is ox and ass, two opposing forces that are one. And then it just keeps going. And then it eventually hits us. And it hits wolf and lamb within us. It hits dove and serpent in us, and it brings those things together. And when we let that principle work its way into our lives, and we learn, like you said, to sometimes sit with the serpentine or to sit with the dove for a season when you're used to being the opposite, and just let yourself be that for a season, you begin to integrate it. And then eventually you see the utility of the thing you thought you had to throw aside. And then there is synthesis. There's thesis, which is what you start with, right? In the Hegelian dialectic, you start with the thing that you think is the only thing that there is. You encounter the antithesis of that thing, and then you throw away the first thesis and you cling to the antithesis. And then eventually there's a synthesis of the two. There's a harmonizing and a coming together. That happens in the world of ideas, and it also happens just in us as individuals. So like for me now, I grew up a naive believer. I became a doubting atheist for a season, and now I'm an atheistic theist who doubts everything I believe and believes everything I doubt. You know what I mean? And I don't feel conflict anymore in those things. And friends of mine who aren't quite where I'm at right now look at me and wag their fingers and shake their heads and think I'm nuts, think I'm naive, think that I'm disingenuous. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you the truth when I tell you I believe and I don't believe. I doubt and I believe. I'm telling you the truth. I've learned to live that way, and it somehow makes sense, even though it doesn't seem to make sense. But that's, again, just another expression of that microcosm becoming macrocosm, or maybe I'm the microcosm becoming more like the macrocosm. That's probably more like it. But
well, the issue with me is that I seek balance. You know, I mean, I am the sign of the scales, like the personification of it. But, you know, the scales do this. And rarely do they hit dead center, true north for a moment where there is complete balance and synthesis. And I think
practice.
If we can find a way to spend a little bit more time in that space, you know, I've always believed that we complicate things. We humans complicate notions that are actually very simple. And one of my favorite phrases is "Peace be still and know that I am God." Well, I don't feel like those words come into my consciousness as God out here telling me to be quiet, listen. I feel like I am part of that God that needs to express. We're out of time. So it's class dismissed. Bill's having a nervous breakdown. Keep your big boy panties on. Oh my God. He's just so precious, isn't he? He's precious. So anyway, so let's go talk about something else.
Okay.
And I'll see you in 5 minutes on A World Awakening.
We'll see you there.
go in peace. All of you go in peace and internal peace. And Jeff and I'll see you on 5 minutes on A World Awakening.
All right.
Mm.
See you there.